Okay, so I'm from Marian University, and I have helped uh, in the last 3 years probably helped edit over 75 research posters. Um, so it's helped me a little bit to understand what makes a better visual presentation of one's research. So I'm hoping to share some of my experiences with you and make your research presentations or help make your research presentations a little bit more visually appealing. Um, so let's go ahead and start. Um, just looking real fast, and if you notice, there's a little icon of a little man standing with his arm raised in the top middle section of your screen. In there, you can feel free to ask questions at any time throughout the presentation, so please feel free to do so. I'm actually going to start out by asking you a question. So, of these two posters, who agrees that the after appears better than the before? If you agree, go ahead and click on the agree, and we'll be able to see your responses. Okay, great. I'm getting some feedback. Um, so love it. Thank you. Um, yes. So now let's dissect that. Let's figure out why does that second poster look better than the first poster. It's really actually quite challenging to develop a research poster because we have so much that we want to share with people, but we also have to design it well enough that they want to look at it. So there is this really delicate balance between the content that we put in our posters versus the design. So we want it to be complete, um, but we also need to make it as concise as possible. Um, we want it to be informative, but also appealing, and we want it to be professional. We want it to stand out, but not in an obnoxious way. So we want to draw people over just by glancing at our poster. We want to draw people over and entice them to come learn more about what we're doing. Um, so feel free to type any questions if you have any. So let's look at this first poster. The first poster has way too much text, way too much going on. First of all, in most poster presentations, you are presenting the poster. So in those kinds of situations, you got to realize that very few people are actually going to read your poster. So the more visual stuff you have to provide them, the better. Also, our sections are inconsistent. If you notice, the boxes are kind of all over the place. They don't line up well in a nice grid. The colors are not coordinated, so we have these purples and yellows, and then we have a picture that has blue, but nowhere else in the poster do we have blue. We have these graphs that are red and green and in no way, shape, or form coordinate. We have these yellow boxes over here that just I don't even know why they're there. The figures are not well designed to convey the information that we're trying to convey. In some cases, those figures are also incomplete. There's not a title for the figure. There's not a figure legend. So it's great that you have a picture, but I have no idea what you're showing me. So overall, it's visually unappealing, and what happens is that conveys unprofessionalism. And so when we go for a job interview, we don't show up in our pajamas um, or our sweatpants. We want to look clean and neat. So when we are representing ourselves and our research in a professional setting, we want that representation to look clean and neat as well. Also, it's fairly evident that the people who worked on this poster did not prepare quite as well as they should have. So if a lack of preparation is evident in your presentation of your research and yourself, that's going to look negatively on you. So in order to convey that sense of professionalism, we want to show some responsibility and some pride in our work, and that's definitely not evident in this poster. So if we look at the second version after the edits, you can see that we have reduced the text drastically. The figures now make up about 40% of our poster, which is good. You want a nice balance between text and visual presentation. So if you kind of stick to the rule about 50% text and 50% images, you're in a good place. So if you notice, we've drastically reduced the text, and we've also separated it and clumped it a little bit better into bullet points, so it's more easily found. The relevant information is more easily found. The sections are consistent, fairly consistent. The colors are more coordinated, so we took some of these blue images and we brought in some blue in our poster. So more coordination. The alignment's a little bit better. Figures are definitely sufficient. Now our figures have titles, and they also have figure legends to explain what's going on, what are we seeing, and some statistical analysis that we didn't really see before. If you notice, the results section is the largest part of our poster. So where do you even begin? First, I want to say, let's keep your purpose in mind. So the purpose of a poster presentation is to provide a visual representation of your hard work. That being said, you may have a love-hate relationship with your hard work. Your research may have been frustrating at times. Those are definitely not the experiences you want to embrace while you're working on this. So when you start your poster, definitely find your happy place. Think about how exciting it was when you finally got all your data compiled and you got to analyze it and see what the outcome was. And definitely embrace the results, whatever they are, even if they're not what you expected, because if it's something that you're not expecting to discover, it may imply something really cool. One of my favorite quotes is that those profound scientific discoveries are not found in the eureka moments, but the, that's funny moments in our lives. So definitely, when you're working on this, stay positive, and that positivity will be reflected in your poster. One of the things I like to do is build from a template. So a lot of universities have their own school templates that they use. That's a great place to start. I've also included some websites, makescience.com and genographics.com provide PowerPoint templates that are easily editable, and you can also change color themes and that sort of stuff. When you're designing your research poster, you need to decide how much space you have to work with. So did you do lots of experiments and you need lots of area, lots of space for your results, for your tables, for your graphs? If so, you may need to make your introduction and your discussion a little bit shorter. Definitely follow all directions. So that kind of conveys back to that professionalism component, where if you're not good at following directions for a simple research symposium and you make your poster too big and it doesn't fit on the boards that they are providing, that's going to reflect negatively on you. So the standard is usually 36 by 48 inches, but each research symposium has its own standards. If you can't find the information readily, definitely reach out and talk to somebody who's in charge. They will be able to give you the measurements and the size restrictions for that. So typically, we'll talk more about this, but typically our posters will have some sort of introduction or background information, materials and methods. The results section should be the largest area of your poster presentation. Conclusions, acknowledgments, and also some references. Okay, So the abstract, I highly recommend only including an abstract if you absolutely have to, if it's required by whatever symposium you're presenting at. Um, in essence, I kind of feel like it's unnecessary because it would be a summary of a summary. So the poster is a summary of your research, and to do a summary of your summary is kind of silly. Um, so if you have to do an abstract, keep it really, really short. We'll talk about that. Your introduction, that's where you're going to provide your purpose um, and the argument for doing it, and also provide a path that leads to the hypothesis that you developed. The materials and methods, we'll talk about different ways that you can present that. Your results section, conclusions, references, and the acknowledgments where you acknowledge those individuals who helped you do this research, either financially or through being a supportive element in your life. Okay, so the abstract is always written last. This is a summary of all your research findings. If you cannot explain your research in 5 sentences or less in layman's terms, you probably don't understand it well enough to present it well. So definitely, if you're not comfortable with summarizing your entire research in a very short paragraph, I would definitely review some of those topics and elements of your research a little bit more. Definitely limit the words. A lot of symposia will have their own word limitations on this. Some of them may be 200, some of them as many as 500. I'm going to urge people to limit their entire poster to somewhere between 500 and 700 words, and increase the amount of visual presentation. In 1 to 2 sentences, you want to describe the purpose or the question and the scope of the experiment, the overall conclusions, and results. So 1 to 2 sentences for each of those, and you'll be able to keep a nice short abstract. And just so you can review later, here's an example of purpose, materials and methods, results, and conclusions. And I believe this was under 100 words. Okay, so in your introduction, when you're writing your research paper, you're going to have a lot of information. So you need to cut that down to just the essential information. Try to limit it somewhere between 100 and 150 words. Remember, the priority is to sell what your research is. So generally, you're going to have to do that if you're going to find funding. So if you want people to be intrigued or be motivated to follow your research more or to fund your research, then you need to tell them the urgency of why you're doing this. So usually we use some sort of statistics to illustrate the problem. I've had students working on Alzheimer's, and so telling people it's the 6th leading cause of death in the United States, and that we've spent tens of billions of dollars on the care for individuals with Alzheimer's, either through time lost at work or whatever, creates that sense of urgency. Make it relatable to them as well. If people don't understand how it relates to their lives, they're less likely to be interested in it. It could be a completely off topic and seem unrelatable, but there's always a way to spin it to make it more relatable to a wider audience. Also, lead the audience, provide step-by-steps, and lead the audience to through a logical path that leads them to the hypothesis that you developed. So you might want to briefly summarize the current field. Largely, you're going to emphasize what you don't know, and that's where you come in. That's where your research has come in, is to fill in the gaps in knowledge that we currently have in the topic that you're researching. Materials and methods section, you can illustrate how you designed and actually executed your study. You want to limit the words to about 100 to 150 for this as well. If you can, use figures, diagrams, or tables, flowcharts even, to describe the process. I've included a couple of examples that I found online here where they show you step-by-step the process by which they conducted their research. So feel free as much as you can to add that visual element. Generally, in terms of what text to include in your materials and methods, usually you put those things that you easily forget. For instance, if you use 4 different concentrations of hydrogen peroxide as your treatment, you might want to include those concentrations in there. Dates that you carried out your study, or times that you treated things for, or stained some cells for, whatever. Any strains or species, especially species numbers or strain numbers, can be easily forgotten. So you'll want to include those as well. Anything that you can quickly just glance at your poster, find those numbers, and keep talking about it without making it look like you're searching for that information in your poster. So you should be able to find that information fairly quickly as you're talking to individuals about your poster. In the results section, a lot of people make horrible mistakes presenting their data, and it never becomes clear. Your results should be limited, even less than what we saw in our materials and methods or introduction. There should only be about 75 to 100 words, and those words should largely be found in the figure legends. So your results should be summarized in figure legends, and you don't need to repeat anything. So the less redundancy you include in your poster, the more words you can cut out of your poster. So that's helpful. Also, if you look at the few graphs that I pulled out as an example, I put a red box around this one that I just did not like. And it's okay. I mean, trends are clear, and that's nice. But the gray background and the lines across the graph actually make visualizing the data more difficult. So the further away you can see these trends and data, maybe 20 feet from your poster, and you can still see the trends, the better. Also, keep in mind, if you're doing bar graphs or line graphs, keep color blindness in mind, because a lot of males have red-green color blindness. So if you have 2 bars that are red and green, they may not be able to differentiate between the two, or 2 lines that are red and green, they may not be able to differentiate between the two. So one of the considerations is to definitely think about the different types of color blindness and what colors to not combine in a graph or in a figure. You also would want to, especially in bar graphs, indicate any of the groups that are significantly different from the other ones. And you can, just like in a paper, you can add a little asterisk above them to indicate that they are statistically significantly different. The conclusions you want to limit to about 100 words. It could be about the same size as the introduction, so that would provide a nice balance, and I'll talk about that in a second. This is definitely not the place to restate your results. Again, we want to avoid that redundancy to avoid the number of words that we're using. So definitely take those results and now identify themes or concepts that are supported by the data. You may want to describe how this advances your field of study, what we've learned. If your data did not support your hypotheses, this is an area where you may speculate on why that happened. And also pull in some additional references that may support your new hypotheses that have developed because of this. And it's also a place that you could put in how, not only how this advances your field of study, but also how this advances life on the planet? Is this going to make, is this research going to, potentially add to a cure for some disease and, reduce financial burdens, reduce or improve quality of life, what have you. For your references, don't forget these. A lot of people, even within their poster, they will do APA format and do in-text citations with last names and dates. Unfortunately, you don't have a lot of room for that, and it's not necessary. So in order to save room for your in-text citations, you can use superscript numbers and provide your references in the order of use. So the first piece of information you reference, that would be the first reference in your list of references. Generally, you're not going to have more than 10. So the 5 to 10 current and really inclusive references from your research should be included in there. And acknowledgments. This is definitely not the place to, give credit to your mom for giving birth to you and all that. But this is the place to thank your mentor. Maybe it's your graduate advisor or your postdoc advisor, an undergrad teacher, whoever. Also, anyone who funded the research. So if the funding came from an NSF or an NIH grant, you would provide that grant number in the acknowledgments. If anybody helped you with your analyses, but maybe they weren't central to the development of the research project to warrant them being a co-author, you would put them in here. For instance, depending on the size of the school, some universities have microscopists, and that's what they do. You do your experiment, you prepare your sample, and you send it to the microscopist who sections it for you and stains it and prepares it. So you may thank them, and this is where you want that. You generally don't want to be more than 4 sentences. Try to limit it to 1 to 2 sentences. Obviously, the more people you have to thank, the more people who helped you, the more you have, but you don't want to get into paragraph-long acknowledgments. Alright, I picked this poster, despite the fact that it has red, I picked this poster to demonstrate a nice balance between figures and text. So if you notice, again, we have about 50% of the entire space of the poster taken up by figures. And notice how much easier it is to read the title and to get a gist of what the poster is about just by glancing at it. One of the things I do like, we're going to talk about this in a second, is the numbering of the different sections. And that becomes important, especially if you design your poster in such a way that it goes against the grain of human instinct in how we tend to read things. So if you look at these two posters, first of all, the one on the left is more of a traditional layout where we have the background leading to the purpose or hypotheses. Sometimes those may all be in one introduction, and then that leads to our materials and methods, which then leads to our results, and then that leads to our discussion, future directions, which may also be included in your discussion, references, and acknowledgments. But a nice flow for the eye versus this one where we start with a little bit of our introduction down to our materials and methods, results, and then you kind of don't know where to go from here because we've got this other section over here that's not the same color, but it's kind of in the results section. So basically we read from left to right. We're going to end up way over here, which means our eye has to come back over here. and then back over here. So it's definitely more of this zigzag way of presenting the information, and the problem is that it's not necessarily instinctual for your audience to read things in that way. So one thing to help them a little bit is including those numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that helps. So if you're going to go with a less traditional layout, I highly recommend numbering your sections, just to help people a little bit. But this is definitely, over here, is definitely a much more natural way in which we read things. Okay, so continuing on our discussion of design, I want to talk a little bit about colors and how you can completely turn your audience members off just by using certain colors. So yellow is a great color for getting people's attention. However, it also causes visual strain and it causes tension. We know that babies cry more in yellow rooms, and actually violent crimes, domestic violent crimes happen more often in the yellow room in the house, if there is one. Red also, it's an attention-getting color, but it evokes negativity, and it can also make people hungry. So if your poster presentation is right before lunch, you may not want to use the color red at all, because then it may make people more hungry, and they will be focusing on their growling belly instead of on the research that you're presenting them. Blue has a calming effect, and it increases productivity, and there aren't any real negative effects of using the color blue. One thing that helps, and I'm going to show you this in a second, is using color wheels. So interior designers use color wheels to figure out which colors coordinate well with each other, and that is definitely a tool. There's tons of online resources. If you just Google color wheels, you'll get tons of online things that will just randomly select various color combinations for you to use. Generally, you don't want to use more than 3 colors, and these, yellow, red, and blue, are our primary colors. You never, ever want to put red lettering on a yellow background or blue lettering on a red background. And if you, now thinking about it, I should have probably included that, but if you've ever noticed blue on red, it almost has a 3D effect, and it's definitely difficult for the eyes to focus on that. Some of our secondary colors, so green is generally associated with nature and health, so depending on the theme of your poster, you may want to choose that. There aren't any real negative components of using green unless it has a little too much yellow in it. Orange induces excitement. It's one of those caution, gets people's attention. However, it is also one of the least favorite colors of both males and females. So too much orange, or even brown, it's another least favorite color. Too much orange or too much brown it turns people off. They just don't like the color. So keeping in mind, now I don't mean to offend you if you like orange, that's okay, but keep in mind the majority of people, so we're trying to tailor our presentation to a wide audience. Purple is generally associated with wisdom, royalty, that sort of thing. One of the cons is that it tends to be more of a feminine color, so it works for the girls out there. The guys that may not look as nice, well, you just may not like purple because it's more associated with feminine colors. Brown does symbolize practicality and reliability, but it also induces boredom. So too much brown, you don't want people to get bored with your poster even before they listen to you. Okay. Black is definitely a powerful color. It stands out. The problem is it uses a lot of ink, so it's great for text, not so great for background. Gray invokes authority and neutrality, but some people sometimes feel it's cold and lacks energy. So if you're going to use gray, you want to pair it with something that has lots of energy, like your orange, like your red, like your yellow. And white, you can see I have a little shadow there so you can see it, it is purity. It also provides an illusion of space. So if your poster's a little cramped, adding big white blocks on your poster will help create and widen that space a little bit, and make it look less cramped than what it is. So now, depending, if you don't have as much research as you would like, and you wish you had more experiments, then you may not want to use a lot of white because it could create that illusion of space. So keep that balance in mind. Okay, so in terms of our color schemes, feel free to use blues, greens, purples, and grays freely. And these are some of the color swatches that I've got using a random color generated. The yellows, the reds, the orange, the brown, you want to use sparingly. So if you notice the yellow here, I paired that with some blue and blue-green colors and some gray. The red, pair it with blacks and grays. It looks very nice, but don't overuse it. So remember that poster at the beginning looked very nice because the red was just used in the headings. So everything else was black and gray and very, very professional and clean looking. Oranges too. Feel free to use orange. If you remember back, let me go back real fast. We used orange here, but notice how sparingly we used it. So the primary colors that stick out to us are the greens and the blues. Okay? So, going forward with our design, notice the one on the left has nice color. The color that the individual chose as the background color coordinates well with the pictures that they are presenting. The figures take up a large portion of that poster, which I love. The one on the right over here, not so attractive. The yellow-orange blocks on the blue background, I don't even quite know how to describe it, so I hope I'm not offending whoever it is that did that. It definitely stands out. It's definitely attention-getting, but the more I look at it, the more I don't like it. So this one over here is definitely slightly more attractive, and I could stare at it longer than this one. Okay, in terms of your font sizes, feel free to use themes in PowerPoint. You can find tons of videos on YouTube for how to actually operate the mechanics of PowerPoint, and adjust your PowerPoint template. But you could change the themes. You could change the color themes, and make sure that everything you create is within that theme. In terms of the text, you can create theme text. So you can have one text for your headings and one text for your body. You definitely don't want to go over 3 fonts for the entire poster, and use them consistently. So whatever font style you choose for your headings, use it for all the headings. If you capitalize, introduction, then you should capitalize your materials and methods. You should capitalize results. You should capitalize conclusions. So just be consistent. Lack of consistency shows your audience that you don't pay attention to detail. So definitely pay attention to your detail. For the body, you don't want less than font size of 28 on a 36 by 48 inch poster. Preferably, you want to have a size of about 30 to 32, and that means you can easily read it from about 6 feet away. You also, for the body, you want to use serif fonts. And what that means is that the letters have these little tails on the end. In terms of reading um, body, so a long line of text, anytime that the letters have those tails, it allows the eye to flow a little better from one letter to the next, making it easier to read. Okay, so basically the letters look more squished together and your eye doesn't strain as much to read it. So I've included a few examples here: Garamond, Times New Roman, Bookman Old Style, Palatino Linotype. Those are all great fonts to use for the body. For the headings and also for the title of your poster, it's a little bit different. So for the headings, this would be the second font. You want it to be clear and consistent. You want it to be easy to navigate and easy to find those headings. So people shouldn't have to struggle to find the introduction. People shouldn't have to struggle to find the materials and methods. Even though it should be clear just from the visual presentation, everyone likes reassurance that they're looking at the right thing, that that they're looking at what they think they're supposed to be looking at and interpreting what they're supposed to be looking at. If you are only using two fonts, make sure that the fonts for your headings match the fonts for your title. And if we look at the title component, if you have a third font, this is where it would be used. It should be easy to read from a distance. So both your headings and the titles should be in the sans serif font. And those are where letters do not have those tails. So notice that none of our letters have those little wispy tails at the end. And what that means is that each letter stands out a little bit better, making the whole word stand out from afar. So when you have lots of text, use the ones with the tails. When you have a heading or a title that you want to stand out, use the ones without the tails. So Arial, Calibri, Franklin Gothic, those sorts. And have fun with it. So just step back for a second and look at the title up here. Okay, so right away this just stands out more and is so much easier to read. Okay, and for the body, if you notice, the words are more squished together over here than over here. So for the body, again, use those words that have the little tails. Use the font that has the tails on it. And you want to allow your poster to evolve. So you may start out within your templates, literally just copying and pasting text from your paper. And then as you go through, you can start eliminating those things that are not essential or completely necessary to convey your idea. They may have just been supporting components of supporting components. So get rid of those components and just pull out those essential key pieces that are needed to get people to see your logic, your line of thinking, and the urgency of the situation as to why this research is absolutely necessary. Coral reefs, for example. We just saw the poster of coral reefs. Why should we care about coral reefs? Well, these are the hatcheries for most fish species in the ocean, and without them, not only do the 3/4 of the population of the planet that live in coastal areas and fish in order to sustain themselves, not only are they at risk, but then the entire ecosystem is at risk too. So little things like that, make it real, make it a real problem in each and every one of your audience members' lives. Bring it home to them. The materials and methods, you can reduce that and make it more visual. The results section, if you notice, that was almost all text, and now we start developing more graphical ways of presenting that. And finally, spice it up a little bit. You can include background graphics. This is just two different ways of doing the same thing. Both of these are way better than what we started with. So, yay. Um, so definitely think about that. Yeah, the top left definitely is a snoozer. So keep that in mind. It is a visual presentation. If people want, and well, if you think about it, when was the last time you read a whole research paper? We generally skim through it and try to find the things that we really need out of it. If people only got about 10 minutes to listen to you and to your research, that text becomes less and less important, and you need to really visualize, help them visualize what you did. Pictures of you doing your research helps. Pictures of the equipment that you used and explaining how it works helps. Um, so I think that's all I have for you guys. So are there any questions? Oh, printing costs and where do you print? So a lot of universities have their own printers, and if you can do that, it depends. So the actual cost of printing, for instance, here at Marion, it actually costs our school about $15 for a 3 by 4 foot poster. However, if your institution has a printing service, much like Staples would have, or OfficeMax, which you could also go to them, the price increase. The price has actually gone down quite drastically in the past decade because of advances in printing technology. But you're still looking at about possibly $75. Another option is they have started printing on fabric, and it makes traveling with your poster a lot nicer and easier, and where you can pretty much fold it up and put it in your suitcase, and then when you get somewhere, um, you can just iron it out. Um, what was the name of that website? Let me find it real fast. Other than the paper printing one, I know I've been getting Postersmith, postersmith.com. So I'll type that in here. Is another one, and they do the fabric printing. Um, so it's quite a nice option. I know a lot of people that have switched, and now that they've gotten fabric, they'll never go back. And this is especially nice if you have to present at more than one poster presentation with your research. Because as you know, the more you take it up and put it down, it gets all crinkly and weird on the ends. Are there any further questions? Well, thank you. Okay. All right. Well, the slides from today's event are available for you. Also, if you could fill out the evaluation link, it would be enormously helpful. I hope this was helpful. I didn't really want to work on the content of it. I thought the design was a little bit more, um, well, where people fail. So hopefully we can prevent that from happening. Thank you again. Okay, looks like I have a question. Can you go ahead and type your question? Is it Shazam? Thank you. So advice for if you don't have much data to present, one thing that we've done in the past are develop figures ourselves. Um, and there may be one way, more than one way to present your data um, to make it look a little bit bigger. So for instance, bar graphs, if you only have two groups using a bar graph, may not look like a lot of data, but using a line graph may make it look like you have more data. That being said, you really want to pick that which conveys the results the best and that which is appropriate. I wouldn't recommend randomly throwing in a pie chart if it's not even applicable to your data. Um, but one thing that we've done is we've found great figures that people have developed, and we have cited those figures and used other people's work to help explain our own. So that is fully acceptable as long as you give credit where credit is due. Um, for those individuals who have access to things like Photoshop and that sort of thing, where developing those figures are easy, you could definitely develop your own. So you can make those those diagrams for how your materials and methods flow, and so that would become a much larger component of your paper. And besides, showing graphical results, take pictures of the results. So what did the outcome look like? Do you have visuals to compare or pictures to compare what one group looked like compared to another group? Um, and adding those pictures alongside your graphical representation of your results just helps enhance and also helps your audience visualize really what was that difference. So for instance, if you're doing a microbial study and you're looking at the antibiotic effects of, I don't know, mint, um, besides just measuring the zones of inhibition that the mint creates, actually show a picture of the size of the zone of inhibition. You could talk about how many starving people there are in the world, but until you see a child actually starving, it has a different, it doesn't invoke emotions or cause the same sort of response as actually seeing a picture of that, right? So if you have any visual presentation of that, any pictures of your results, any pictures that you use to gain your results, you can definitely throw those in there. Any other questions? I hope that helped. Good. Yeah, pictures, they're worth 1,000 words, right? Any more questions? There you go. Yeah, the art of s'mores. That's fantastic. Okay, thank you guys. Very nice chatting with you. feel free to contact me. John has my contact information. Feel free to contact me if you have any further questions. My email is kvote@marian.edu.